Welcome to today's edition of Oracles of Eye Innovation. With me today are Sean Ianchulev and Adam Szaronos. Sean is the chairman of the board of Iantrek, and Adam is the CEO. We're going to be talking today about their journeys to where they are today, about innovation, particularly as Sean's background as an ophthalmologist. And Sean, why don't we start there and just if you can tell us a little bit about your journey to developing innovative technology and what sort of led you to that pathway.
Yes, Kris, nice to meet you, and it's great that you're hosting those podcasts. I think it's great to spread the story of innovation as much as possible because I think today more so than any other day, it's really important for us ophthalmologists and doctors to actually get more involved in innovation because that's actually a path to not only better care, but in some cases even survival for our specialty. So I think that my pathway going back is quite nonlinear, just like my life. I started out originally in a small country in Eastern Europe called Bulgaria, which was behind the Iron Curtain, clouded in the reality of communism, where I lived for almost 18 years. And then when the Berlin Wall fell and the communist system broke down, the gates opened, and I was one of the first waves of youth that actually came out to pursue the American dream with about $200 in my pocket and a lot of enthusiasm. And they said there's nothing more adventurous, I think Mark Twain said, than an empty pocket. So so that really, I think, makes you take a lot of turns and twists and detours and not take things for granted. And again, in medicine, we as doctors actually follow a very linear path that is very well prescribed and determined, where you have to do your college education, pre-med, medical school, then you have to do your residency, internship, residency, fellowship, and suddenly after 20 years, you've arrived to be now a physician, and then you start with a junior partner or junior faculty. So everything is very prescribed and very linear and sequential and additive. But we do live in a hyperbolic world today that scales very fast, and people talk not about scale, but hyperscale, and the field has flattened and technology travels very fast. Yet we operate clinically from education and to practice. We operate very linearly. So my path has been really nonlinear. And after I completed my college at the University of Rochester and medical school at Harvard, actually one of the first branch points was when I decided to enroll at the School of Public Health and get a Master of Public Health degree. And to me, it was very peculiar that our medical education did not include public health. And maybe because I came from a system that really kept medicine and public health was one thing. And so I was very interested about, public health and what happens to healthcare and how we deliver healthcare. That opened my eyes. I realized suddenly how much more there is to healthcare than being a doctor and just the clinical training we're getting. Because there you interact with nurse practitioners, you interact with CEOs, you interact with epidemiologists, with healthcare management, people that really look at healthcare in a very different way than just the spectacles of medicine. So that was my first realization that, boy, healthcare is a lot more than medicine. But it had nothing to do with innovation. It was mostly the realization that we as doctors can have an impact that it can be non-additive and very scaled if we are able to impact healthcare in a global way. And then the second nonlinear piece, when it kind of caused the detour, was when I was a resident. And we used to have at the time, this was really 20, 30 years ago, when I was starting to think about not just doing cataract surgery and taking out the cataract, but really delivering refractive outcomes. At the time, the average error post-cataract surgery was one diopter or more, and nobody really cared as long as patients can go home and see with the spectacles. And we were starting to see also some post-refractive patients after PRK and LASIK. having really, really exaggerated deviations with the cataract because we didn't have a good method to calculate the power of the IOL. So that's when I came up with the idea is like, why don't we really use intraoperative biometry to do that? And when the eye is in a transiently aphakic state, people who put in another implant, why don't we just do aphakic biometry or aberrometry to see what the optical deficit is right there? And that's how was the beginning of the Aura technology. But as a resident, we started out the first cases. We published. We had the patent technology developed, and then I started to realize how, as the technology was really being adopted and becoming more popular, even before the acquisition of WaveTech by Alcon, how much impact it. I can see 50 patients in a clinic day, but now we have 5 million or more that have been treated with better care with this one technology. So for me, that was really the two things was the public health aspect, realizing that healthcare is more than being doctors, and then the innovation allowing you to hyperscale your impact in the field.
I'll come back because I've got a couple questions about the Aura, but Adam, you are, we could say, coming from more of a traditional business background. And you started life or your most of your career in large multinational companies. So what led you into beginning to work with smaller startups? And what I guess what is maybe one key thing that you've learned about the difference between a large multinational and working in a startup environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. So thanks for the opportunity to have this discussion as well. I would say I've been out of the big companies now for over 5 years, but I spent almost 15 years at Alcon, and I started as a sales rep and marketing and management. At one point or another, I think I worked in every single surgical business unit, leading teams and launches on the anterior segment side. Even did a short stint in the vitreoretinal. But I would say the niche that I started to find myself in at the big company is one of kind of being the entrepreneur. So I got to play entrepreneur, but inside a large organization, which means you get high frequency experience launching new ideas, exploring white space ventures. That's kind of where I would work a lot, is if we said, hey, there's this new idea. We're not in this space yet. We want to see if there's something we can build out of it. And if it's successful, we get to critical mass. We absorb it back into one of the larger businesses like Vision Care. You got to almost kind of do the skunk works thing, right? The old firewall around a protected business unit, build it up, and then absorb it in.
Yep.
And I love that. I had more fun doing that. I grew more doing that than, running, $200 million established, businesses. But eventually I got to a point where I said, I want to really put the cards on the table and see what it's like to build one of these when you don't have a multi-billion-dollar logo in the corner of the business card. When you've actually got to now be thinking about how in the world are we going to finance this? How will we cover payroll? How will we raise the right debt and equity structure? It's a very different building side of the equation. And so part of me knew I had a great experience there, but I eventually wanted to actually go build that and maybe build something that would go public or be, picked up by a large strategic someday. And so an opportunity came along several years ago with a company called Tier Lab, which was in the process of, they had a lot of public market turmoil. Many people are familiar with it. The asset was about 15 years old and was looking at bankruptcy, and a private equity firm thought this is an opportunity to see if we can turn this around and take it private. And that was such an exciting opportunity for me because underneath what I saw was a really exciting technology and a good team of people. At that point, I think it was down to 10 or 12 employees. They had really been gutted quite a bit. But you had good people and you had good technology. And I thought this is an exciting opportunity to see if there's a product market fit story here. Can we revise this thing? And ultimately, over the next several years, we rebuilt the team and the clinical and the pipeline and moved it from a dry eye asset into a premium cataract refractive surgical asset for helping prior to advanced technology surgery. And that was a great experience. And we ended up exiting that to Bausch and Lomb Surgical. And I found myself here at Iantrek. But your question, having now maybe almost 15 years in the big company and 5 in the small, it's a question I asked one of my earlier mentors, Tom Frenzy, and he answered it the same way I'm going to answer it. He said, at this point, I think he had a 30-year career, 15 years, both in big companies and in the startup space. And he said, the work is the same and even the stress is the same. You can't work any more hours than we have available. But he said the difference that I found is in the big company, a lot of times that stress is pushed on you. And in the small
Mm.
company, you realize so much of the stress is originating from you. There's no they in the small companies. You're sitting in a room with 4 or 5 people and you're making the decisions. And you realize the stress you're living in is very often a result of the decisions you made maybe several months ago or last quarter or whatever. And so if you can learn to live with that and figure out how to function in that, that's the formula to think about. That's the difference between. And I found that to be really true, but also really exciting. It's very empowering. Um, and so that's how I would answer it too, only 5 years into this other side of the world, but I love it.
That's a great answer. And Tom has been, I worked with Tom at Bausch for 2 tours and then did Refractech with him. And I remember when Refractech was going out, and I stopped in the office out in California, and it was Tom all by himself because everybody else was gone.
Yeah.
And what's next? And he goes, "Oh, I've got, there's more in me. There's more in me." And then WaveTech came along, and I ironically I in I'm just realizing helped launch TearLab in Europe
Yeah, that's
and
right. Yeah.
worked with Aura, then Orange, from a very, very early starting point. So, and both of them went through really difficult periods where people didn't believe in the technology, were extremely skeptical about the need for these technologies. And yet, because of people like you and Sean, there was a perseverance to start to, and the knowledge to develop commercial viability. And I think one of the things my observation is, and I would love to hear what you two think, um, innovation is a great and wonderful thing, but it in and of itself, it will not be successful
Mhm.
as a rule. It takes amazing tenacity and perseverance and funding to make a technology successful ultimately. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's another, is it just come down to a lot of hard work and stubbornness that gets a technology over the line?
I have an interesting take on this. I just picked this up from Andy Corley at the ACOS meeting a couple months ago. And as Andy's known, so articulate with so few words, and he
Mm.
just he said this in a way I've never thought of. And we're at the ACOS meeting, and we were just about to close our Series C financing, and he's on our board as well. And he said, a lot of people look around at him at the meeting. A lot of people think innovation is about just coming up with an idea. And some of those people will even move the idea into like a product, and some may even have a plan. But at the end of the day, unless you're able to get it financed, unless somebody's going to sign on the line and put the dollars behind it, you haven't really been an entrepreneur. You've been playing with ideas. And I know Sean's had over $1 billion in exits, and he's maybe the best person in the world to answer this.
Mm.
But it was this is the end defining point. Anything upstream of this is just working on ideas until it gets to the point where it's capitalized and it's prepared now to have commercial impact. You haven't really crossed the finish line. And I thought that was such, in terms of entrepreneur, after
Mm.
of course, there's years of iteration and growth and everything, right? Operating the business. But that was just such a clear articulation of it starts with the insight or the idea, but it ends here. And those are the bookends of entrepreneurship for that particular product. And I just, the way he said it, I thought was a really good way to kind of capture the end goal. Because if you're not thinking in terms of that being the end goal, then the idea is not going to be prepared to have impact. It's going to sit in a laboratory shelf. It's going to sit in your head. It's going to sit in a marketing plan on your desk, but it's not actually ready to go forward in the market yet. So I think that's a perspective that's fresh in my mind, but is a good way to potentially think about it also.
Sean?
I mean, I agree. It's perfectly said, and that's kind of one of the things I like about Adam. Is he says the same things I'm thinking, but more speculative.
Well, I'm just quoting people that said it better than me, so maybe I'm just hitting.
That's true. That's true. We agree on many things, and it's good to sometimes see that we're not all in our own echo chambers, and that's one of the big things about innovation is that you surround yourself with people that are really a pleasure and privilege to be around. And we have some of those people, as you can see. We talk about them even though they're not here. So that's great that they always come up, and in fact they are around. It's actually Adam when he joined, he joined the board and the company. I call it the tribe. We're not, it takes village for many things, but for innovation, I always say it takes a tribe. You have to be very different. You cannot just be slow. You have to have this casual intensity. But it does really take great people around the table. Because one of my mentors I always laugh is Bob Sinski, who probably had the best ROI on an invention. Took a instrument, bent it, called it a Sinski hook, and we use it to this day. And I always, whenever we drink wine with Bob, too bad he's not around us anymore, but he was a mentor and a friend. It's great that in the old days, that's what it took to really innovate in many ways. You would take an instrument, you come up with something manual, and you don't even need an engineer, or you need somebody to put some polishing touches. These days, innovation, we operate in a very regulated environment. You have FDA, you have engineering, you have clinical, you have reimbursement, all these things that weren't there. It's a multifactorial environment. You're dying by 1,000 paper cuts every day. And so it does take a lot more than what it took Bob Sinski with the Sinski hook. And I wish it were that way, because a lot of our friends today that come to me, and every week there's somebody from a resident or a medical student that we have, and it was kind of privileged. We have the biggest residency program in the U.S. here at New York County, near Mount Sinai. We have a lot of residents now, especially around AI. They're so interested in innovation. Innovation was kind of a dirty word 20, 30 years ago when I started doing it. Most people didn't know what innovation was, and why aren't you doing research? You're either doing academia and research, or you're doing in private practice. But innovation, nobody could compute at the time. And now people are having chief innovation officers and all that, emphasis today, which is good if it's not overdone. But yeah, I think that surrounding yourself with the right people, and we're kind of blessed at Iantrek. We have amazing people on the board within the company that allows us to really accelerate and get this done while we're having fun, right? Because it's actually a lot of fun. And when doctors come and say, "Oh, I have a great idea," I said, "Well, that's great. It's not that interesting. Ideas are so many, but taking the idea into a solution, understanding it's a solution, because many ideas are really not a solution, and then taking the solution and saying it's a product. So you have to productize it, what Adam said, which requires a tribe. And then the product, you have a great product. But if you don't have somebody like Adam to come in, commercial level CEO and talent, organize a sales organization, and you don't have the marketing muscle, you're not going to sell. It's not going to become a business. Unfortunately, I keep saying we're not in the TikTok business model where you get a video and it goes viral. Our product, you don't get a refractive, which actually I use, and I really like the technology when I was in Bob Sinski's practice. It's great. You need a rep. You need somebody to explain it, to train the doctor in the medtech world with the drugs as well. I mean, you have to really, really detail and invest in even the commercialization. And a lot of the VCs discover that everybody wants to invest in late stage, great, and they find out even in the late stage, it is a pretty big piece. You still have to launch and have commercial success, which in today's environment is not as easy as taking the doctor golfing.
Yeah. I always like to quote Joe Mandato, to name a name, and he's somebody I've learned a lot from about investment. And he always says it's called venture for a reason. And if you talk to him, he'll be really frustrated by the market today, because most investors are looking for late stage investment and trying to de-risk. And innovation is about risk, in my opinion, and that's why we do what we do. But you so often see, I'm sure it's the same for you, Sean, in that you see younger, doctors with ideas, or an inventor, and they think it's a great idea, and they come to you and they're ready. Okay, we can go. And the number of arguments I have over a given year about, no, you can't just start selling your product. There's all these requirements that you have to meet, whether it's in the US or Europe or somewhere else. And I think there's a real gap about what it takes to get that innovation into the marketplace, like you were just saying. And that kind of leads to the next part of what I wanted to talk to you both about it today, about the evolution of a startup, and that getting it to that point where you've got a large funding round and you can really start to accelerate, and what it takes. What are there, in a way, is there two different, is it two different teams, two different mindsets that are required to do the pre-commercialization work and the post-commercialization work, and how do you think about that, Sean?
I mean, I think even Adam can answer that on the other side, because you have a lot of CEOs that come from a different background, or a lot of executives, let's say. Because ultimately you can be a founder, but when you lead a company, you have to be an executive, and you have to really do the management vision and strategy and all that jazz, which is very important in order to motivate people to be productive when you come out of the garage. And again, I think that whichever way you do it, if you start out from the more development side, you have to really train yourself to understand the commercial reality. And if you start from the commercial side and say, hey, I've identified that if I do 5% of the diabetes market, I'll have a multi-billion-dollar product. Well, that doesn't mean you have 5% of the diabetic market and you have a product that really you can do for that. And so some of the commercial folks will start in becoming early stage CEOs. They actually think about the commercial opportunity, but then how you sequence it. And sometimes a lot of the things that become very big, including, we talked about some of those technologies that everybody thought were irrelevant, even the mixed phase in glaucoma. When I first started with incentives, why do we have we have a trabeculectomy and tube. Talked to most glaucoma specialists said there's no need for anything. They never knew that the paradigm would go, or for premium IOL, why do you have to worry? As long as my patient is within 1 diopter and they can put the spectacles, it's a home run. That was 25 years ago. So most people do not appreciate the evolving need that will be not today, but in 20 years or 5 years. So to me, really, that becomes a matter of being able to put yourself in the future and then look back and then understand all the gap analysis of things that you need to do as an executive in that. But that being said, I mean, the only thing I'll say is people have to evolve, right? There are plenty of people who are really good doing very early, and they know it, and they really are not people for the late stages. And if you know it and you're honest with yourself, then you know that you have to pass on the baton. And you may not be with that company, or you'll be in different capacity, or you stay as a chief scientist or something else, because when you grow the company and it becomes commercial, it's just a different phenotype of an organization requiring a different skill set. I remember when I was at Genentech for 10 years, Genentech grew tremendously. That was right before we even launched Lucentis. It was a smaller organization, 15,000 or 17,000. Still, when I left Genentech, when it had matured to being acquired by Roche, at the time became 160,000 person organization. So there's a huge difference between even a 15,000 person where your CEO and your executive team is right next down the hall and you can talk and see them, or 150,000 when they're in Basel and you don't ever see them. So I think even in those organizations, there's a big inflection of what the organization requires and the processes and protocols and the culture. So it's not for everybody, and some people realize that, or are not as effective as they used to be in a smaller organization. So I think what I understand is that we all have limitations, or we all have passion for different stages. So if you have the option to choose, why wouldn't I be more involved in starting the next company or helping the next product versus teaching and preaching the sales forces and organizing a very effective sales force, which ultimately I'm sure we can all learn. Maybe, you want to do something else or you want to be a surgeon. So I think that's where I think it's great for people to realize either where their passion is, where their skill set is, and where they want to be, uh, so that they can really recruit the talent that they need for this organization to succeed later on.
Right. Adam, any thoughts about evolving an organization?
Yeah, I think Sean hit on a couple things. I do believe what you heard him say is there's really no such thing as a great blank, as a great marketer or as a great CEO. There's really you're great for a particular stage the organization's in. That's the person that you need. And that's true for all of us in our own roles. I mean, there's no such thing, I don't think, as a great surgeon. There may be a surgeon who's great at complex cases of this type or, this type or so you got to be careful painting these broad general terms. And I think promote this idea of what is the need right now today and what's the best fit for that. And we're all evolving and we're all going to have our own specialties that we're stronger or weaker in. One of the definitions that I use a lot with my teams on innovation, because that's one of those dangerous buzzwords that gets thrown, comes from MIT, and they say innovation is the process of going from idea to impact. And so I love that it doesn't focus innovation on the widget. It's not the thing you're working on in your laboratory. It's the process itself. But also it has a very defined beginning and end point, right? Idea, what was the initial insight or idea? But it's not an innovation until it's reached the endpoint of impact. And I think that's really important because you can fall in this trap of thinking, well, I'm an innovator because I have an idea, but it's not impacting anybody positively in the world. That's not a true innovation. And some people will also think, well, as soon as R&D hands it over to the wall to commercial, the innovation's done. Now they just got to execute. No, there's a whole world of innovation and potential impact refining you can have and how you product market fit and how you price it and the business models and what's your competitive set. And there's a lot of work to still be done. So it gives this very broad, holistic view. It starts with an idea, but it really never ends until you're having positive impact. And one of the things that I really liked about Sean and that I was carefully looking for, because I knew him by reputation, but we hadn't met yet when we made the decision to work together on this, is he's an impact guy. And a lot of entrepreneurs are the idea guys. And they're really passionate and attached to the idea. And that can cause problems because we all know somebody who's had an idea they've been working on for 20 years and the launch is coming and they keep working on it and they hasn't moved past that stage yet. But Sean is married to the impact. He is in love with the impact. He is not married to the idea itself. And if the idea needs to evolve and shift, as long as it gets us closer to impact, that's what I saw with him right away. And I think his reputation speaks for itself on that. But seeing that firsthand, he's a very easy founder to work with because sometimes you can run into there's too much identity on the initial idea and it's going to prevent it from evolving as market data comes in and as surgeon feedback comes in because you're trying to protect the idea of something rather than the impact that it can potentially have. So for that reason, he's been very easy to work with, and I think it's one of the reasons he's been so successful in this space is he's an impact-focused entrepreneur.
I think that's a really interesting point, Adam, because a lot of times, and one of the things Michael Moroccan, who's we work with at MedDevice, the CEO of Alitex, said to me years ago, and he's a serial entrepreneur, has invented a lot of different things, brought them to market, sold them. Don't fall in love with your product.
Yeah.
Never fall in love with your product because then you can't let it grow and develop.
Or your idea. I think, we'll tell people too, because I'm big on promoting feedback cultures. You have to separate yourself from your idea. You are not if you think you are your idea, then anything that even refines it slightly is an attack on yourself. And you're going to have defenses against that. Whereas flip it to fall in love with the potential for maximum impact. And any road that gets you there is a viable path. Let's figure out the best one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something in our organization we talk about a lot is working the problem, figuring out the path to get to the right answer and to get to the solution rather than getting stuck with the original idea that's not necessarily working. This is kind of the questions that I had laid out. It's a little bit of a shift, but talking about the right people and the mentality and everything, and taking something from idea to innovation. How do you find the right people? How do you know people who are going to make that journey with you? Maybe starting with Sean there.
Well, skill them.
Sorry?
I think you skill the right people. Like you don't hire them. I mean, it's literally if you find somebody that again, this is a very complex question, and you probably can have so many answers to that. But I think that the right people, especially the really good people, are not always available, and they're not necessarily calling the headhunters every month. So if you find somebody out there that you feel can be helpful and it's going to be the right candidate, you have to move really fast,
Yep.
and you have to, it's just like with Adam. I think Adam, we met for the first time. It was literally a couple of months later, we decided to move forward together, but literally the whole decision was made until you paper it up, but it was made in a couple of weeks. And I always include other wise people in that, especially people that are already, if you're in an organization with a culture, I would say take your also other people in your team to opine, because they have to endorse it, or they have to really accept that new person as well. And if they're part of the process, it will be easier. So I think that actually to include other people and listen to what they observe, because we all observe people through our own refractive error, right? We all have different, we're all myopic, astigmatic, we're all having our biases. We want to see things and we see certain parts of them. And so again, I don't want to get into how you interview and find the pathology out there. It exists. And we know that, between behavioral problems and personality disorders and psychiatric disorders, probably 15% of people have one of those. So you have to be very careful when you hire, and you have to be, I think, systematic in that way. But this is a whole science, and we've all made mistakes. I wouldn't say I'm a perfect person in terms of always hiring the right one, but I think that you have to be very deliberate and cautious. But at the same time, you have to, once you find the talent, you really have to pursue that and bring those people, because you want to surround yourself, whether it's through the board or through the team, you want to surround with the people who can help you stay real, execute, and really fill out the multifaceted team you want to build. And the ROI, return on innovation, it's not just the money. Everything else is the fact that my colleagues are using these technologies and patients are getting treated and patients are saying, wow, I'm served by that, by the whole ROI, return on impact, or however you want to put it, but it's more than the investment, right? So I think that when you do that, one thing that's helped me realize is that if it works, we're all going to be great. And if I'm a little bit less great because I gave more to others as part of the journey, that's okay. Because, even if you are great, you're going to donate the money. So you might as well not really go into trivializing the hiring process and the relationship. So how do I pay this person 5% more or 10% more, or how much options I give? I've never really argued about that. I've actually always argued for people getting more compensated, because we're trying to hire on the top of the curve, not the median. And really, your people who you hire have to be there, because you have to navigate a very complex environment today. It's nonlinear, and where you start out is going to be very different where you end up. And the survival is really who got you there and who is able to think through how to modify things and make the company successful. So I think you're really, in all of this, I've never felt like I've overpaid for talent personally. And so what I've also learned is when you have that, really, don't be too nervous about compensating people who are instrumental to your success.
One thing I want to add to that, because I've made this mistake in the past, is don't try to hire for the title. I know we said that earlier. There's no such thing as a great blank. It's very specialized to the stage and the problems at hand. So when hiring people, I always think, well, forget about the title, because if you just say I need to hire a product manager or an engineer, you're going to shop for people with those titles. But spend time really saying, what is the problem I need to solve for in the organization right now? So forget about the title. What's the problem that needs solved for?
Yeah.
And who's going to be best to solve that problem? I don't, it could be from a different title. Maybe they've never held that title before. But sometimes we get so hung up on title, and then you go look for the, poster guy or gal that fits that profile for that title, rather than going back to the root when you start the recruitment process, which is what's the problem we need to solve for right now in the organization in this area, and let that be the job. Title can come later. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons for me that I probably, like many managers, learned over trial and error over the years. But make sure you know the problem that needs solved for, and find the candidate that's best to own that problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I would say for Adam, when we talked, it was very easy to hire Adam because immediately it became apparent. We cut to the chase, and we spent about half an hour talking about how you make the perfect Texas brisket, and I'm like, wow, this guy is really having attention to detail. He knows his stuff, and I'm a guy that, on Easter time, we put the little lamb on a spit, and we do the lamb roast as well. So I think that, we really hit it off right away, and we got down to the nitty gritty. So I think we're yet to compare his brisket to my lamb roast. But the bottom line is, I think that yeah, interviewing people is very hard. It's the hardest decision you have to make, who you surround yourself with. And unfortunately, early in the game, some of the best experts in the field, some of them do not want small companies because they want job security, and they're spending, for them this is a big. So you sometimes have to make do with, and that's why I call that the tribe and a little bit of the ninjas. Art. You
Hmm.
have to make do with what you got. You may not have the world's best engineer or the world's best clinician right off the bat because they're already doing something else,
Mhm.
but you still have to be able to get to the next stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Being here in Strasbourg, France, we don't have a big, we can't tap into the ophthalmology tribe. So we've had to build a tribe, and we've just hired very bright scientists, and they figure it out, but people often look at it and say, well, where are your ophthalmology people? I'm like, they're there, but it's interesting because you just have to, sometimes you make do, you figure out what that person, what you need, and then you go find that person, and it generally works out. Whereas, yeah, I agree completely about, if you recruit specifically on your ideal, it's not gonna, chances are it's gonna fail. So Sean, I have a question, or sorry, Adam, I have a question for you as we sort of wrap up our conversation. What's it like to follow in the footsteps of Sean, of a company founder, and take the reins and take it forward like you are with Iantrek now?
Well, it's been a great experience, and I would say it comes back to a point I raised earlier. Is when I was getting to know Sean, I was actively trying to understand, okay, is this a idea focused founder or an impact focused founder? And I saw him to be an impact focused founder, which has been so important because as we get into the commercial stage, there's going to be, I mean, this is when the real insights come up, especially in medtech. This isn't like pharmaceuticals where you spend 10 years, carefully, evaluating through rigorous FDA trials, and you have a very specific patient and a labeling, and you know exactly what you're going to say commercially. In medtech, a lot of our insights come once you're in market. And that's really important to me as a commercial stage leader, that I know that Sean was going to be an impact focused founder, because we are going to get a ton of information that may fundamentally start to shift the trajectory of where we take this thing. And so I found him to be that, and his history spoke to that. And so it's, for me, it's been very easy to work with somebody like that. And I know that's not always the case. And I've seen firsthand founders that get too attached to the idea, and it's almost, there's intransigence to modify and try and move this in market, even as insight comes that says, hey, it'd be better if we did this over here, or have we considered this? So for me, I think it's been a really good kind of yin and yang partnership. I mean, I can't at all do what he can do. I've never done a surgery. I've never authored a patent. He's got incredible insights, and he's got the brilliance to help formulate these new directions. And I think, coming on the footsteps of what he started, it's really a privilege now to figure out how to navigate this thing for maximum impact in market, and make sure we build the right infrastructure and the team and the plans to do so.
Sean, anything to add to what Adam is saying?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been almost, Adam, now almost 8 months, right? Since you came on board, was it January, February? And we worked, I mean, it's been such a great partnership. I feel, every day is super exciting for me. It did take quite a bit of load because I was kind of doing all the medical, the development, even from the patent calls to building a team before. And I actually did not intend to stay for almost 4 years to Iantrek to be to take the lead. But I think he was a good friend of mine, Jim Duan, said, Sean, when I was very impatient, I think, Sean, things don't always happen on your timeline. And so I always remember that they don't, right? I mean, when is the company going to succeed? Or when is this going to, I think they don't, unfortunately. And one thing that was very interesting about that company, which is very unique, is that it's actually 3 companies in one. Before we had Transcend doing the suprachoroidal stent, and then we had, you have Ivantis doing your slam canal scaffold. And then you have all these goniotomy systems or canaloplasty systems. So these are all different companies, different products, one company, one product. And as we all know, it's so difficult these days. So we pretty much do one company, one product with a little bit of a life cycle plan. Here we have 3 companies, 3 products. We have we have the first bio tissue technology or biostent, 100% biologic stent technology in medicine. But we have a bio interventional technology for the uveoscleral alcohol, which is kind of the biologic equivalent of some of the stents that we had there. And that's one product that takes full attention and development. Then you have the T-Rex platform, which is a 19-based technology that really transcends all the catheter technology from 30, 40 years ago, and it's able to do a mechanical 19-based canaloplasty with goniotomy circumferentially, which is a separate product. It has nothing to do with the first one, and it's basically not a category where there's other products there. And now we have also a bioscaffolding, biointerventional technology for the canal, which we haven't revealed, but it's right now fully productized and will be probably on track to launch soon. So, I had to stay longer in order to see through the development of all that, because we became pregnant after COVID with triplets, and at one point you just have your gestation period is a little longer. so that's why I wanted to make sure they're all in a good place, so that when we go and launch, now we have a sales force and people are so excited to come and work with Iantrek because they see not one, they see 3 technologies, great culture, great commercial CEO, great team, and things that are solutions, products, and businesses on their own, except they're under one roof.
Right. Okay. I really appreciate both of you taking the time today to join the Oracles of Eye Innovation podcast. And I should finish up by saying congratulations on your funding round. In a tough environment, you guys have kind of crossed the threshold that a lot of people are a little bit jealous of, maybe. And I know it was a lot of hard work and it took quite a bit of time, but I guess that the next phase is commercial ramp up and throwing the bar even higher.
That's right. Yeah, we're excited. We're in a good spot coming into AAO right now with a lot of opportunity. We're ready to go after. So it's crossing that one off the list means we're capitalized and now actually ready to go build for the impact we discussed. So the team's very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Oracles of Eye Innovation podcast. If you have an idea for an upcoming podcast or would like to be interviewed, please contact us at the email address in the podcast show notes. Until next time, I'm your host, Kris Morrill.